Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Feeling Seen podcast, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. I have, as I said, slightly pre-recording when we got on here, I have a legend in the house today. I have an icon among us to talk about some icons, really. But you might know this filmmaker's work from such titles as the notorious Betty Page, Charlie Says I Shot Andy Warhol, that little film called American Psycho, and now, newly, Dollyland. Mary Harron, what else could the people possibly need to know about you before we get started, other than all of that headline material?
Oh, I don't know. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm excited. I was a journalist before I became a filmmaker, and that's a bit relevant to this, to what I'm going to talk about.
I was a journalist in earnest for 15 years, did long stints at Wired and New York Magazine, and it is always a thrill to have a journalist among us in the house, because it is, I feel like filmmaking, like so many creative professions, you very much do what you are when you are a journalist. It might be a career that I personally have left behind formally, but the interiority of me being a journalist with like a capital J, that is, I think, for the rest of my life.
Yes. I think you never get over that, and I think it's also, being a journalist is being really curious about the world, and that's, I think, why people become journalists. Is that, for me, it was just always a way to enter worlds. Actually, it was like access, and also just I do love research and just endless asking questions and curiosity, and I think that stays with you whether you do something different or not.
Well, then when I believe you made I Shot Andy Warhol at 42 or 43, and that was your first film. So was it that sense of like going into different worlds and that sort of curiosity about people that made filmmaking like, you know what? There's another career that I just simply cannot deny. What was the thing that brought you from journalism to filmmaking?
Well, it was a gradual thing, because even when I was in New York, when I was young, and sort of in my early 20s, and I was sort of fell into writing about music. I nearly never intended to be writing about music. I'm not, music expert at all, but I fell into sort of, the New York punk scene, the very beginnings of it, in CBGB. I was very fortunate to discover that world and be part of it.
God, what a time.
Yeah, it was a great time, and be interviews. And I just wrote about it because I was really writing about the culture. Punk was really interesting as a culture. And then I sort of got stuck, writing, reviewing concerts, which I felt like I wasn't necessarily qualified to do. I felt, this is odd that I've ended up doing this. I never intended to. And I moved back to London, and but actually, even while I was in New York, I was thinking maybe I should try and go to film school. Maybe I should try NYU, which I didn't in the end. But I moved back to London, and in my mid to late 20s, I was writing about music in London. But a lot of my old friends from college were working in television, and it was a kind of really interesting time in documentary. And so for years, I was like, I wish I was working in TV. I wish I was working in documentary. and then I was also started writing scripts, in my late 20s, around 30, maybe, started writing scripts with my best friend, Frances Pelsman, and we were writing some stuff and thinking about, so I was thinking about scripts. And then I got a job as a researcher in TV, which was really fortunate, first on a pop music show and then on a serious arts program. It was when I was doing that I was the researcher on a film about Andy Warhol, and that's where I discovered, got the idea for doing a film about Valerie Solanas. And it took me years. I mean, one of the things I started directing kind of sort of in my mid-30s, mid to late 30s, and I was directing short films for television for a few years. I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And then I moved to New York to write a film about Valerie Solanas. And that took, I suppose it took 7 years from the idea of having the idea to make a film about Valerie Solanas to getting it made.
That sounds about right.
But in the process, some of the stuff that I've made films about, I started researching back then as part of my work, like Betty Page, was something I was trying to do years before. So I like to think it all. But I definitely made a late start, but tried to make up for it.
You know what? I am 38, and I am making that late start currently from about my mid-30s. So, Mary Harron, you're giving me so much direct inspiration. I'm simply gobsmacked right now.
Yes. Actually, I was 38 or 39 when I moved from London, left my career, good career in London, and I just left it and moved to New York, and because I got a chance to do a show for a few months in New York, and thought, okay, I am going to just move and start again and try and get this film made. So it all worked out well.
Well, I feel like now is a good time then to invite the third journalist into the room in the form of His Girl Fridays.
Yes.
Hildy Johnson, played by Rosalind Russell, which is the character you've brought for us to discuss.
I'm through.
You can mad all you want to, Hildy, but you can't quit the newspaper business.
Oh, why not?
I know you, Hildy. I know what quitting would mean to you.
And what would it mean?
It would kill you.
You can't sell me that, Walter Burns.
Who says I can't? You're a newspaper man.
That's why I'm quitting. I want to go someplace where I can be a woman.
You mean be a traitor?
A traitor? A traitor to what?
A traitor to journalism. You're a journalist, Hildy.
A journalist? Now, what does that mean? Peeking through keyholes? Chasing after fire engines? Waking people up in the middle of the night to ask them if Hitler's going to start another war? Stealing pictures off old ladies? I know all about reporters, Walter. A lot of daffy Budinskis running around without a nickel in their pockets. And for what? So a million hired girls, motormen's wives will know what's going on? Why, Oh, what's the use? Walter, you wouldn't know what it means to... Well, I want to be respectable and live a halfway normal life. Point is, I'm through.
Movie from 1940. I think Howard Hawks was the director. When did you watch this? Was this early on in your life? Did this come later?
I really can't remember when I actually saw the first film, and it may not have been until my 20s. But I always loved, I think when I was a young girl or an adolescent, I really loved those films from the 40s, 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of the heroines, because they were, fast-talking women in smart suits.
Yeah.
And I felt like they were more smart. I always wanted to be like the Hitchcock heroine or someone who's clinging to a cliff face, exchanging banter with Cary Grant while you have some adventure and you're solving a mystery or you're chasing Nazis or something. There was an idea that these women, had adventures. Cool, and I found that much more attractive. I always loved sort of thrillers and kind of screwball comedy more than I loved straight romance, I think. And so those I just felt an affinity with those women.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I wondered if I wanted to ask specifically about that incredible era of basically women's pictures in the 1930s and 1940s, where it was such a in the way that we talk about Equality Now and Time's Up and Ask Her More, and the wanting the sort of wanting to push women forward with more substantial roles, more dynamic women, intersectional parts. It was almost like the 1930s and 40s with the beautiful wave of women's pictures with these forceful heroines, the faces that we think of that define the golden age of Hollywood, the studio era of Hollywood. It feels like we are not even yet back to now the richness of the palette of heroines we were offered in the 1930s and 40s. It feels like that was a default slate that was created in film programming at the time in a way that feels like we have to fight and claw for that level of Cate Blanchett movies to get made at this point. And I wanted to hear from you, I guess you talked a bit about it, but what is, I guess I want to, is there anything you could speak to about the nature of the contrast between those heroines you identified with growing up and the ones that you see made available today, or that you're given permission to make films about today even? Do the 40s still have a leg up on us on what, in terms of what leading women were able to do?
I wonder, well, I think one thing is that they were making more of them, and they had a machine and they had to feed the machine. And then you had these amazing stars. So you had Katharine Hepburn, or Betty Davis, and you had Carol Lombard, Lauren Bacall. So you had these great images of women, and I think they had to make a lot of movies. Which they don't now. I mean, it's big, not that many smaller movies. Whereas, a lot of these movies are very low budget, actually. I mean, if you look at the Maltese Falcon, it's shot in 2 rooms, on the lot of a few alleyways. I think one of the things is there's great female performances. And then very often at the end, they give them an ending where they sort of backtrack.
Oh my God, His Girl Friday does not have a happy ending.
Yeah.
His Girl Friday is not a happy ending.
It's not a happy ending, but it's
Hildy Johnson.
It's a better ending than it would be if she'd married the guy.
Yes, this is in 2023 His Girl Friday. This is a she chooses herself kind of ending.
Yeah.
But instead it's like, oh wait, no. The last image we see of Hildy Johnson is her grimacing and following Cary Grant out of a door as he chooses his job over their next honeymoon.
Yes.
Duffy, everything's changed. Tell Louie to stand by. We're coming over the office. No, don't worry about the story. Hildy's gonna write it. Of course, she's not quitting. She never intended to. We're gonna get married.
Oh, can we go on a honeymoon this time, Walter?
Sure. Hey, Duffy, you can be managing editor. No, not permanently. Just for the 2 weeks we're away on the honeymoon.
Oh, what?
I don't know where we're going. Where are we going?
Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls, Duffy.
2 whole weeks, Walter.
Sure, you've earned it. What? What? Strike? What strike? Where? Albany? Well, I know it's on the way, Duffy, but I can't ask Hildy to...
Honeymoon in Albany.
Yeah, okay, Duffy. Well, isn't that a coincidence? We're going to Albany. I wonder if Bruce can put us up and say, why don't you carry that in your hand?
Well, shit. I'm glad we went through this whole arc with Rosalind Russell through this movie. The newspaper man, Rosalind Russell.
It's better than... all those movies where, it's Katharine Hepburn movies where she realizes that, having a career just makes me unhappy, and I'll be miserable because I've chosen my career, and there's no good way for me to being a working woman. And one thing that I do love, and I should just say about just a little for those who don't know the movie, His Girl Friday is actually based on a movie called The Front Page, which was about ace reporter Hildy Johnson. I can't remember who played it in the original sort of 30s movie, but in the remake it was Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. But it was about an ace reporter who wants to go off and get married and have a life, and his editor is scheming to get him back because he needs him to break this huge story.
Yeah.
Howard Hawks decided to make the reporter a woman. And one thing about Howard Hawks, who's a very complicated figure but a fantastic director, and I think he was, as badly and horribly behaved to women in his, private life as any other director of the era in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. But he loved these and found sexy these very masculine kind of women. He starred Lauren Bacall. He loved these women who wore suits and sort of talked fast and deep voices. Had a lot of sort of sassiness, and I think that he loved this kind of masculine strength in women and found it sexy. So I think there's sort of what you can break down and disapprove of in a movie and what the dominant inspiration of that movie is. What I take away from the movie, and I did when I was young, is that Cary Grant, who's a sort of ultimate, sexy, bad but lovable man. Yeah. What he most loves about Rosalind Russell, about Hildy, is that she's a great reporter.
Yes, absolutely true.
He loved that.
Before he's saying get married again, he's saying come back to the paper. You're going to work at the paper again, right? We got a spot at the paper. You can't go work for another paper. I'll give you a raise.
Well, haven't you got anybody else?
No, there's nobody else on the paper that can write. This'll break me, unless... Hildy.
No.
Hildy, you gotta help me out. Just this once, honey.
Will you get going?
Get out of here, Duffy. I'm busy. Now, look, honey.
Please, save your breath.
This'll bring us back together again, just the way we used to
That's
be.
just what I'm afraid of. Any time, any place, anywhere.
Don't mock me. This is bigger than anything that ever happened to us. Don't do it for me. Do it for the paper.
Scram, Svengali.
Look, if you won't do it for love, how about money? Forget the other offer. I'll raise you $25 a
Listen
week.
to me, you great big bumbleheaded
I'll
bad
make
boo.
it $35 and not a cent more.
Well, are you gonna listen?
Well, good grief. How much is that other paper gonna pay you?
There isn't any other paper.
Oh, well, in that case, the raise it off. You go back to your old salary and how do you like that? Trying to blackjack me.
Hold on, I
in
wanna
my
show you
need.
something.
Yes, I'll give you a raise. Let's get married, but you're going to work for the paper. And what that is saying is that she's the best reporter around. Better than all the men. And so, that to me was, and I don't think I broke it down like that to myself, but I found that really sort of fun and inspiring, that there's a woman who's great at what she does and is sexy for being great at what she does. That's pretty kind of rare, So even though there's always some element that you can take issue with in a 30s movie or 40s movie, they're much better than the 50s movies, where the woman is just going to be suicidal and tragic if she doesn't get married.
A lot of histrionics.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of that of I'm president, but I'm not happy. I'm a president, but I'm not happy. What I really want to do is be at home with you, And that was the big message, even to films that when I was a child, or there were films when I was growing up, which is 60s and 70s. I didn't love the dominant image in movies either, which was a sort of hippie image, which was sort of angelic flower child or
right.
mother, which was that you didn't want to be too smart or intellectual, because that would mean that you weren't in touch with your real feelings, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Your real feelings being that you would sleep with whatever, guy,
Yeah.
wanted to sleep, So I didn't find the flower child, earth mother thing anything that I could relate to. So I really fell back on those old school movies as an inspiration of film.
Did you find that when you were starting your film career and in the 90s and with the queer cinema wave of the 90s, which is something I bring up a lot on this podcast, and the indie heyday, indie cinema heyday, that sort of Sundance flourishing period in the 1990s, did you feel at that time that you were seeing heroines that were more aligned, that you resonated with as much as you did from those movies in the 30s and 40s around that time? Or does that era still stand apart after the 60s, 70s? Wait, like, does the 30s and 40s still stand apart sort of for you in terms of like what still kind of rings truest for you? Or did that ever kind of come into fashion again in a way that you felt satisfying?
Know that they ever, there's lots of great movies about women.
Of course.
Now. I think also you're very influenced by the films you see as a child.
Totally.
And a teenager and in your youth. Oh, the other thing I was going to say, just one last thing about His Girl Friday.
Oh, no, keep going about His Girl Friday. We're here for His Girl Friday.
When I was a child, there was a comic strip in the newspaper called Brenda Starr Girl Reporter. And I loved Brenda Starr Girl Reporter because she was young, red-haired, young woman who would go out and get a story. And and when I actually moved to New York, I remember pasting on my bathroom walls. It was sort of as a joke, but also seriously, because I was like a young aspiring journalist, a full color page of Brenda Starr Girl Reporter on my bathroom wall. And I also love Nancy Drew, Girl Detective. And those were the things I loved, was these girls who went out and had adventures. Had pursued the story and had adventures. And I sort of think was always looking for that.
I was going to say, so I guess it sounds like then, like from the time of you being very young, the girl reporter, the lady reporter was something that really, I think this gets to what we started our conversation with, was that when you do journalism, it is often that you are a journalist as like a personality trait. And that's something that you cultivate, but I think in a way is sort of intrinsic to you as well. And clearly, like, these were intrinsically resonating with you, girl detective, girl reporters, from the time when you were very young.
Yeah. I mean, then I remember when I was like 6, I wanted to be an authoress.
An authoress.
And I thought I would write children's books because that's what I read, So obviously I didn't want to write adult books because those are boring. So I was definitely, read a lot and was into that. And I think later, when I was young and I would go to movies a lot, I used to start going to movies on my own as a teenager.
Yeah.
Just because I wanted to see like old movies, National Film Theatre I was in London, growing up in London. As a teenager, and would go to the National Film Theatre and look at like 1940s movies, and also sort of European art movies and stuff, and
great,
of course Buñuel and stuff, and I just sort of started putting my taste together. But I remember thinking at times, I'd love to. Maybe I could be a screenwriter. I don't think I'm a particularly good screenwriter. My husband wrote the new movie. I'm not. On the whole, I always would want to collaborate with someone or do someone else's screenplay, but I couldn't think of another way to be in the movies because I wasn't going to be an actress, and I never thought about being a director because I really didn't know any women directors.
Right. Yeah.
Apart from Leni Riefenstahl, really, it was the only one I could have named. And then later, but that wasn't until my 20s I saw a Lena Wertmuller movie. But I really didn't know I guess there were a few people that I wasn't that aware of, but there were very few. I mean, it was not something that you think, I'm going to grow up and be a film director. Whereas a young woman now could easily think that.
Yes, I completely agree. And I wondered if you remember that part from His Girl Friday. My favorite part of the movie, I think, is Hildy literally chasing down a man and tackling him in the street.
Talk to you. Walter, listen. I've got the whole story on how Williams got that gun and escaped, and I got it exclusive. Yeah, that's right, and it's a pip.
And it just feels so much like that's such a thrill of that career, is sort of like the literal or metaphorical version of like running down something to make it happen. And I wondered if like, is there a sort of equivalent feeling as a filmmaker of that, like chasing the thing down and tackling it with your entire body to keep it in your hands
in very slow motion, because
that's kind of why I'm asking, I think, because it's so protracted.
Yeah, getting a movie made, it just takes years and years. So whereas as opposed to kind of nailing a story, it's just like, it's more like this endurance test slog up a mountain, I think. Really.
Well, and I think I was thinking like between because I think it was reading an article, like an interview about you, and there was the quote dubbed you like the quote unquote psychopath auteur with like the profile of figures that you have, made films about in your career. But the thing that I was kind of fixing onto was with Rosalind Russell as the figure that you picked here, and then with talking about like appreciating that era of film, the 30s and 40s, with those just bigger than life stars, your Crawfords, your Hepburns, your Davises sort of situations. There is, to me, the thread between like the movies you've made and those things that sort of raised you is iconography. And I wanted to hear about your, I don't know, perhaps fascination, preoccupation with, or like relationship to considering and studying iconography and then building your own art around it.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely interested in celebrity and the effects of celebrity on people. And my dad was an actor. I spent some, couple years of my early life in Hollywood, and my dad was under contract at Paramount. So I remember, this is a famous family story that my dad took us to the set and we met Joan Crawford. And it was in the best of everything with him. And she was with her daughters or whatever. And my sister and I curtsied because we'd been taught to by our grandmother. And she started slapping her daughter and saying, see the nice little girls, why don't you curtsy like that? So when the daughter's book came out, Mommy Dearest, I believe that's true.
Yeah, no, my reflexive thought as soon as you said that was like, well, that fits the myth, I suppose.
So I was interested in Hollywood. I'm also interested in like failed Hollywood, sad Hollywood. I remember spending a couple summers with my dad, and
in a way, Charlie Manson is failed Hollywood.
Failed Hollywood archetypally.
Yeah.
Sad failed Hollywood. The underside of Hollywood and the underside of the dream. This is the Mulholland Drive, really, which I think is a great movie. That movie that really captured that really dark, sad side of Hollywood, and the dark side of fame, I think, is very interesting to me. And and I'm also interested in identity. Private and public. Definitely Daliland has that about who are you? Who are you if you're famous?
Yeah, you are talking about some of my favorite topics, journalism to film, and the identity of celebrity. Like, this is a greatest hits list for me.
And it's just very, very complex because, what is it that, I guess the people who manage it best are the ones who keep a separation between sort of who they are and have a very obvious persona.
Right,
that they can project. But it's fame, especially in America, is a very tortuous thing, dangerous.
Yeah. Have you now, over the course of like having done so many films that sort of hone in on this with figures that Andy Warhol, Betty Page, Charles Manson, Salvador Dali, like what about that examination continues to surprise you over time? Or is it, because I'm looking at like the sweep of those figures and the eras that they inhabit, is it like, it's a tale as old as time, and the shocking part is actually the repetitiveness of how similar these ups and downs and these falls are?
Well, it's interesting with Salvador Dali because he and his wife, Gala, because it's a film really about a marriage.
Yeah. I liked that. I really liked that about it. I was like, oh, I'm appreciating this is the angle that I'm traveling through a story with. I was so completely compelled by Gala and that like tension between the two of them.
Oh yeah, well, and also great performance by the wonderful German actress Barbara Sakova, a legend of her own. One of the things is that they were conscious myth makers because nobody becomes really famous unless they really want to be.
Right. Yes.
I knew this from writing about music and rock stars and all that. If you're going to become that famous, you have to really want it. Now you may then find it's more than you want or more than you can handle, but you have to really want it in the first place. And there are lots of very talented people. I know great actors who don't want it that much.
I feel like Joaquin Phoenix is like a classic example of like someone who clearly like shrinks away from that, but is also like participates in their own myth making to a degree. Like they did that whole fake documentary about themselves with Casey Affleck, where like he participated in the creation of celebrity enough to like build a fake persona around a documentary and like live that art.
Yeah. So people are torn, and God knows you can understand why, but it's very interesting then what it does to identity. And I guess, Dali and Gala, they've created this myth around themselves. He puts her on, Gala, in all his paintings and dedicates her and paints her as the Madonna and paints her as mythic figures. At the same time, they have a completely sexless marriage. She's having sex with all these other people. She feels actually in some ways like a bit discarded. One of the things that we don't show it in the film, but Gala talks about it in the film. It's when they came to Hollywood. Suddenly, in Paris, in the heyday of surrealism in the 30s and 40s, they had been kind of a famous couple. She was the sex symbol of the surrealists, had affairs with all these people. They come to Hollywood, and Disney wants him to make this animated film with him, and nobody's interested in Gala because she's an older woman. Yeah, and it's all about like and Dali, once he came to America, had this completely branding of the mustache and the image that you could put. He was on the cover of Time magazine, and suddenly it's just him, and she's in the shadows. And I think the sort of backstory to Dali Land is what that did to them and to her, and her sort of anger about being somehow discarded by the world a bit, or overlooked. And so there's all that complication of celebrity, what it does to a personal relationship. And then it does to, and I don't think there's any answer as to what it does to identity, to personal identity being famous. Like, in a way, who are you? Like, who was Andy Warhol with his celebrity and his masks and his sort of performances? Every interview of Andy Warhol was a performance. Same thing with Salvador Dali. Every interview he gave was a performance, or very rarely did he really open up his heart,
We're going to take a quick break, but when I come back, we will be talking more with Mary about her work, including Daliland, American Psycho, and a personal favorite of mine, The Moth Diaries. Then I will have one quick thing before I go about that new Luca Guadagnino movie trailer, Challengers.
All right, class. Tomorrow's exam will cover the science of cosmic rays, the morals of art forgery, and whether or not fish can drown. Any questions? Yes, you in the back.
What is this?
It's the podcast Let's Learn Everything,
where we learn about science and a bit of everything else. My name's Tom. I studied cognitive and computer science, but I'll also be your teacher for intermediate emojis.
My name's Caroline, and I did my master's in biodiversity conservation, and I'll be teaching you intro to things the British Museum stole.
My name's Ella. I did a PhD in stem cell biology, so obviously I'll be teaching you the history of fan fiction.
Class meets every other Thursday on Maximum Fun.
So do I still get credit for this?
No. Obviously not.
No.
It's a podcast.
Dear Reading Glasses, it's been years since I've been able to read. I missed it so much, but I had no idea where to start. I felt so overwhelmed. But thanks to your show, now I'm back to enjoying books again and feeling like a reader. Love, Sarah.
Yeah, that's an email we actually answered. Okay, maybe not that email specifically, but one just like it, because most of our listeners are named Sarah.
We're Reading Glasses, and we're here to solve all your reader problems. We give advice, help you find books you love, and discuss reading without making you feel pressured.
No matter what you read or how you read it, we'll help you do it better. Reading Glasses, every week on Maximum Fun.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. This week I'm having a great time with trailblazing director Mary Harron, whose latest film is about Salvador Dali and his wife Gala. So let's jump right back into that conversation. And an interesting thread that gets into, like, as Dollyland goes on is the notion of age. And I think that's a fascinating consideration, and like the idea of celebrity and the idea of celebrity identity and who are you really, who were you, who are you building yourself to be, and like the icons that have been present in your movies. Charles Manson is obviously aged. But like the image of him that still endures is that like wild-eyed mugshot. And Betty Page is obviously an iconic pinup figure. And Andy Warhol, like we see him in a certain set way. And it was I liked that aspect of the narrative in Dollyland of like watching Gala like take off her makeup in her private room, her private little residence, basically her whole castle, and like pray to God to not get old. And at that point she already is an older lady, yes. But she just, please don't let me get old. And she gets it. I like that carried through. Like she gets into a fight with Dolly. She's like, you bitter old man.
Yeah.
Like you're old. And like they're probably the same age or thereabouts. And it's so fascinating to me to think of that tension, and like these iconic Hollywood figures too, like they're so preserved in amber for these sort of like spectacular, like to the like watching how like a Joan Crawford or a Betty Davis would preserve themselves like in very grandmotherly ways with like getting their hair set and their makeup being so particular even in older ages as they stepped out into the public eye. Like that consideration of what age does and what it means to a celebrity when you have so many memorials to you at your heights of your physical glory, and then watching yourself age in comparison to people's awareness of you. That must be a fucked process to undergo.
Yes, I think it was very difficult. Gala, in fact, when we were researching, when my husband John was writing the script and we were researching, there was almost no footage of Gala.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's a lot of photographs from the 30s, but almost nothing of her voice, very little that we could give to Barbara Soukova, which is interesting because I think as she got older, she did not, want to be photographed, which I understand actually as you get older. It's like I was like, cut me out of those photos, but it's painful because then you have a certain image of yourself, and Betty Page never wanted to be photographed, and it's when I was young it was like I remember my mother saying don't photograph, and I was like, really? And now I'm like saying the same thing to my daughters, and we're all vulnerable to it, and I think
that's such a month. Oh no, stop it. I don't want to be in the picture.
Yeah, no, I'm always doing that as well. And it's like, but imagine if you're famous. Imagine if you were a famous beauty. How hard the pain of the world.
I have thought about this so much, Mary. This is like the kind of aching that I feel when I think of what that process must be like. Like that is lonely, and like it's a weird thing to be like, I can't believe I'm not so beautiful anymore. It's a difficult thing to say to people and be like, empathize with me. But like the idea of like knowing you're Dorian Gray, like you have this like Dorian Gray thing happening where your painting is aging and you're seeing the painting age and you're just fucking terrified of that, and you just want to be preserved forever because you know how exalted you were at a point in your life for being XYZ thing that we deem acceptable and gorgeous. Like what a strange transformation, an unrelatable one to go through compared to like on a scale that is for the famous out there that it is compared to most people who are, your everyday moms being like, keep me out of the photo.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we need, we demand icons. I mean, that was one thing that Warhol understood and Dali understood, both very Catholic, obviously, that we need things to worship. And both their art dealt with certain kinds of icons. And that but also it's, as a culture, we also need to destroy our icons, and we need to have people to publish photos of aging stars to show them looking terrible, and we need to destroy them. And I don't know. So I'm sort of fascinated by the sort of the religious aspect of our need to elevate and our need to destroy, and what that does. It's just this strange human thing. At the same time, I guess I'm also interested in, we were talking about it before, was just who are you, and the idea. And there's no, I think it's funny because people always want an answer, but with these people like of who was Warhol, who was Dali. Yeah. I mean, you can only get a lot of like different photos and put them to montage it together, because you won't find the single key. Mm-hmm. There's such layers of identity, performance,
Well, and if I, you know, the idea of living alongside one's iconography, if I may ask then, what is it like to have made American Psycho? Like, what is it like? I have to imagine it's kind of like you're the Stones and you're like, I'm playing Satisfaction again.
Yes.
And like, you're grateful for Satisfaction, but also, fuck, guys.
Yes. It's like, it's so funny because I'm so happy when someone comes up to me and they say, I love your work, and I know they're going to say American Psycho, and then they say Charlie Says or something, and I was like, yeah, I love you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
if I may say, The Moth Diaries, okay?
And
Moth Diaries.
Thank you, because at the time when that came out, everyone hated it, and
I love a fucked female friendships movie. That's my bread and butter. And Sarah Bolger is such a tremendous actress, and she's just still so low-key being amazing, and I love her in that movie. And Lily Cole is such an I wish she acted more, and I know she's out there like saving the world ecologically now, and I love that for her, but like she's such a fascinating screen presence and is so good. And that's a movie I really appreciate.
Thank you. And people have actually, it's funny because I was being interviewed in San Francisco at the museum a couple weeks ago, and this woman brought up Moth Diaries, and she said, "Oh, your face just lit up," and I was like, "I'm so happy because I'm so happy that now gets an audience, and it's kind of been because I think it's not a vampire movie; it's a movie about messed up adolescent friendships, which are to me that was a movie about young girls' friendships. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they are gay and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
But they're more that like they pour all the emotion that they'll pour into adult relationships into their friendships. And when the friendship goes wrong, there's nothing worse because they're both so beautiful and so powerful and can go so wrong. And that, I had, and I have 2 daughters, so I observed it and, in my life and their life. But at the same time, there's no word for the beauty and the terrors of young girls' friendships. And when the movie came out, a lot of sort of male critics said, this movie's cowardly because it's really supposed to be about a lesbian relationship and they don't show any lesbian sex. And
you lack imagination, you fucking losers.
It's like, no, you have no, we don't have enough words for love in in English.
Mary, you are so right about that. If you listen to this podcast for even another episode, you would hear Jordan Crucchiola say, so friendship love stories. I am, and I'll say it as many times as I can, I'm a panromantic gray asexual person. And for me, like, sex has never been a part of my life. It's not what I desire. It's not what I pursue. And so dating relationships, that's never been a part of my purview. Like, friendships are my great romances. They're what when you talk about that, like, that's why I really gravitate towards those kinds of films. And I know it's why Moth Diaries was such like a potent viewing experience for me, because I love movies that dive into that insofar as we've come unnamed level of like desire but not sexual, and competitiveness and covetousness and love and adoration, like that melting pot of all those things I feel in this sort of like cataclysmic level way that I relate to my friends as like my great love stories. Like that potency of those teen stories that just hits so well for me, because I'm queer, but like you couldn't call these gay friendships because they haven't been that. And they're not unrealized or unformed because I have not had sex with these people. It is simply not about that.
Yes. And I realized having very, very intense relationships with other girls, like in college. And eventually I realized, because at that point I think, am I gay? Which would have been much harder. Like, do I have to go on marches now? And like, do I have to?
Yeah. Am I an activist?
Do I have to like dedicate my life? Because in those days you would have to dedicate your life to an identity. Actually, having sex with these people would add nothing to this. There's no kind of.
It's not missing that, so it wouldn't add anything with it.
A hidden desire. It's just a very intense, exciting thing where you meet the person, your heart beats, and you're so excited to see them. And to me, that is the kind of love or affinity or intense romantic friendship that I've had with men and women. I've had it with gay friends. I've had it with male friends who I'm not going to have sex with.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Seeing them, and I don't know. It's just a poverty in the culture. I'm hoping now with what young people are doing that maybe there's more room, or they'll create more words or more identities for as they're having a sort of more advanced spectrum.
Yes.
That's my great hope for the future, which I think is on the whole a really hopeful thing. Yeah.
I'm feeling seen by this conversation with you, Mary.
Good. I'm glad.
Thank you for coming on and being an avatar for my own life experiences. The gift you didn't know you were giving today. I appreciate that. Well, I like that like it's life is fun when you live it through, like, not problematic, but like through obsessions.
Yes.
And through like infatuations and through falling in love. And if we can have a bigger breadth of, and I think that is a fascinating through line of your work with the iconography, is the aspect of like these figures who are driven by obsession and who we then become obsessed by, and the cyclical nature of watching that, being a viewer of it, taking it in, then experiencing it, and it becoming this like circular process of being all wrapped up in something. And that's a fascinating arc to have consistently about throughout your career.
Well, I think, what happened with my first movie was I became so obsessed with the identity of Valerie Solanas, with uncovering the Valerie Solanas story. I discovered her, I knew all about the, Warhol, because I'd written about him, and I'd met him, and I'd interviewed him, and I'd written a lot about the Velvet Underground and a lot about Warhol when I was a music journalist. And then I was researching this big documentary, and I discovered the Scum Manifesto, and I realized that I knew nothing about her, and that there was almost nothing about her. If you look in the biography, it's like 2 little references, and it's all about the fact that she shot him. So she was a complete mystery, and it was pre-internet. So in order to uncover the life of Valerie Solanas was this detective work. Back to the idea of Brenda Starr, detective, and
yes, your very own Hildy Johnson.
Yes, and then I was working on a show in New York. That's how I got to New York, was working on this BBC show that was doing a New York series, and this young intern, Diane Tucker, came on to work on it, and I could see that she was this young feminist who was a really fantastic, very super smart researcher. And so I asked her to come and work with me for no money on let's come and uncover the story of Valerie Solanas. And for years, there was one point, because no one was paying us to do this, we spent a day going through a phone book, all the phone books in the New York Public Library kind of phone book room, trying to find this one person who was this great friend of Valerie Solanas, and couldn't find their name. And anyway, we went through, magazines and phone calls, and Diane got transcripts, and she tracked down a copy of Valerie's missing play up your ass. and it was perfect. It's years and years of this, but I always felt that Valerie, my obsession with Valerie, that Valerie was pulling me forward. Like I had I'd done these short films with BBC that had done well, and I was, doing well as a youngish, TV director, but nothing had shown me that I could, necessarily work with actors or make a movie. But I felt like Valerie was just like pulling me forward. My obsession with this was so strong that it was able to overcome all the years of waiting and all that, and the obstacles and people saying you're crazy to want to make a film about this awful woman. And somehow Valerie and my obsession with her pulled me through.
That affirming my supposition. Thank you for that, and I'm glad you, in being the indefatigable journalist that you are, did not give up on that.
No,
and I sadly have arrived at. I have to ask you a last question.
Okay.
Oh my God, I want to just keep talking to you. This has been so much fun. But I guess my last thing would be with I feel like going from journalism to filmmaking, like you're still a newspaper man. You're still a newspaper man, like Hildy Johnson. Like you continue that pursuit of new worlds and minds and characters and curiosity. But what I wonder is, with I've obviously read you say, and many other filmmakers say, like, making a movie is so long and hard. Like making small films is so long and hard. How have you found it challenging to maintain your curiosity in the sort of trenches of what it takes to get these things done and made? And continuing, and it's sort of a rejoinder onto that being, what is it that still keeps you curious after all of this time?
Well, I try to do, even though I've done quite a lot of historical figures, they're all very different stories. Yeah. And the style is always different, I'd say. I don't think that any of my films have really the same style. Some of them are sort of more naturalistic than others and more stylized. And the subject it's always a world. I think I like building a world. And so I never build the same world. It's never the same era.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I'm not going to go back to the 80s. I'm not going to, with Dollyland, I hadn't done the early 70s, which, and I moved to New York in 75. So it was a world that I remembered and just create that. So I do love all that sort of texture stuff and all that research. And what I say, and as I say to my husband every time we think, oh, why are we doing this? It's like, but we'd have to have real jobs.
That's so real.
And that's terrible, because at least you're your own boss, and I've had real jobs, lots of them, so I know what that's like. And I feel in a way it's Mark Twain said, about being a writer, it's not a job, it's a privilege. And it's true. Yep. Being a filmmaker, it's even if you're working for no money or trying, it's a privilege to work, do any kind of creative work.
You are Gala screaming, I will not be poor, but you are screaming, I will not have a real job.
I will not work. Yes, I will not have a real job.
Well, Mary Harron, thank you so much for taking this time to talk to me today. I couldn't have guessed, assumed, imagined the wonderful ways I related to you in this conversation. I'm so grateful for that. So thank you for taking the time today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jordan. That was really, really fun.
Thank you so much again to Mary Harron. What an unexpected event of feeling seen for myself in that conversation with her. That was a lot of fun, and I so appreciate her taking the time. Her latest film, Dollyland, is in select theaters now and is also available to rent or buy on demand. And if you live in LA and are listening to this right now when it comes out, it just so happens that His Girl Friday is playing at the new Vidiots Theater in Eagle Rock this Saturday. You can go support independent cinema houses while you support a classic film. So check that out if it sounds good. And hey, you know what? If you're not feeling His Girl Friday, you can also go to the video store that is attached to Vidiots and watch any number of things that your heart desires. So that is the plug for local cinema. You Angelinos, get out there and do your duty. And now for our one quick thing before we head out, I want to touch on the trailer for the forthcoming Luca Guadagnino movie, Challengers, it stars Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Feist. Those two men, they're kind of like the British Georges to me. It's sort of all one guy. They're doing good work out here. I've enjoyed Josh O'Connor and Emma. I've enjoyed Mike Feist in West Side Story. They're fine actors in their own right, but it's that sort of intersection of faces of the British Georges that really just kind of loses me. But anyway, that's not the point. That's not why we're gathered here right now. Why we're gathered here right now is because Luca Guadagnino, that guy will make all kinds of fucking movies. How is this happening? I feel like Luca Guadagnino's output is what we say, this is what we need more of in Hollywood. This is what we need more of in cinema. It's original stories that are all different, often quite weird, really interesting, good ensembles, unexpected, usually anchored by a bigger star, often Tilda Swinton in his work. Now Timothée Chalamet has become a frequent collaborator, but other than that, sort of casting that you wouldn't just pick out of the hat of the big studio shortlists for who's going to sell a movie. And obviously you've got the Zendaya hook in here, but then you're going to bring in these two lanky gents who are going to complement her as co-stars. And this movie, the trailer for it is it plays it kind of feels almost like an erotic thriller. It looks like an erotic thriller and a sports drama, which, hey, coming off his cannibal love story horror drama, Bones and all, why not make a sports film that is about a love triangle with Zendaya and two men? I think Luca's just out here kind of doing it all. And every time I see something new of his, I'm like, really? That guy made this movie? And I'm very excited that he continues to want to, I don't know, just roll the dice and do something seemingly unexpected compared to the prior movie that came out before Bones and All. You have Suspiria, which I can see how we went from Suspiria to Bones and All. But like before that, you have movies like A Bigger Splash and I Am Love, and those don't necessarily plant the seeds for cannibal love stories and Dan's Macabre. But yeah, challengers. Zendaya plays a teen tennis sensation, it looks like, who is about to rip up the world. And she meets these two it looks like up-and-coming tennis guys themselves. And they, you know, are just dazzled by her. It looks like they have a threesome based on the trailer. But right before she's about to basically come, it seems like the second coming of Serena Williams, she suffers a devastating, it seems like, career-ending injury. We jump forward in this trailer, and she's, like, married one of the dudes from the threesome, but, like, prior in the timeline, it seems like she was the boyfriend of the one she didn't go on to marry. So a love triangle situation. She's now the coach of the dude she married and has led him to Grand Slam success in his tennis career. He's a superstar. And then it's like, yeah, but he's like flagging or he's like jaded or something. So she enters him in a challengers tournament, which is way below his status as a champ. But in that challengers tournament, he will encounter the other guy he used to be best friends with that was part of the love triangle when they were young. So I'm like, is this an erotic thriller? Is it a straight up drama? How much like sports movie are we doing here? Like what's like the on the court situation? Like how does Luca Guadagnino handle a sports film? Is sports just going to be off in the background somewhere? A lot of questions. Excited to find the answers out. And excited for Zendaya. And excited to see a new... I'm really hoping, like, there are some shots in this trailer that are, like, slowed down, just close-ups of Zendaya looking like a bad bitch wearing sunglasses. And I'm hoping those close-ups are the prevailing vibe of the movie. Of, like, how much bad bitch Zendaya can we get? I'm hoping ruining both of these men's lives. I'm going to be a little disappointed if she's, like, married and wants to like preserve the marriage. I'm hoping this is like a long game of hers. My hope is that she blames both of them for her injury for some unconscionable reason. I can't understand how they would be responsible for an on-court injury of hers, but she blames both of them for her lost career and potential and for being like the woman behind the scenes of a Grand Slam champion tennis man. So she has to endeavor to, when she gets her shot, ruin both of their lives and hopefully careers. That's what I'm rooting for. Anything's possible though with Luca Guadagnino. So we really, you know, couldn't say so confidently one way or the other. But that's the one quick thing. Challengers coming out this fall from Luca Guadagnino Go Zendaya. And that is our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod or send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorcru on Twitter, Jorcru. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.